Well, hello everybody. I've got straight up 6 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure there'll be people that join us as we go along. You all should know that we are recording this session, and we will post the link to that recording on our Facebook site once it's ready to go. It usually takes a couple of hours for a presentation as long as this. Well, I'm Steve Brown. I'm with the Cooperative Extension Service. I'm a professor of agricultural extension, which means I'm the Mat-Su Copper River District ag agent. And this is a class I put together because, like many of us, at some point in time, we were a first-time Alaskan. And I know when I got here, I had to unlearn everything that I knew about gardening outside and learn how to garden in Alaska. But before we get into that, I want to introduce Melissa Clampett, who is responsible for Third Thursdays. If you have an idea for a program, you can always contact her. And then moderating tonight is Deb Blaylock, which is a real honor to have Deb here because she is the president of the Mat-Su Master Gardeners. We'll have a final slide on the Master Gardeners at the end of this presentation, but you can certainly ask her any questions that you wanted. A little housekeeping, if you don't mind, in your box where you can see your picture or your live video, go down to the left-hand corner of it and be sure and mute yourself because we're going to take all the questions through the chat box. So if you scroll down to the bottom of your page, you'll see a little tab that says chat. You hit that and a chat box will open up. And I think we've covered everything. Oh, I will give you about 30 seconds to run, go get something to write with. There's going to be a couple of times in the presentation where you may want to write down a web address or an email or a publication name. You can always email me for any of that information. I'm going to give you my email address here at the very end and my telephone number. We'll just take a moment there. You should have run to the kitchen, got something out of the junk counter, and are ready to go. So let's get started. Oh, I wanted to say this entire presentation is based upon a really excellent publication from UAF. It's called 16 Easy Steps to Gardening in Alaska. It's about a 20-page document, and it's free, and you can download it online. If you look there at the bottom of the page, the publication number is HGA-00134. If you Google just that publication number, it will come up in the first part of the search and you can download it. I highly recommend it. This presentation, normally when we do it, is about 2 hours. We've learned over the last few weeks that Zoom meetings compress time, and we really want to shoot for things that are 30, 45 minutes long because people just fry on Zoom. So download that publication and enjoy. So to get started, why a home garden? Well, one of the bullet points that we don't have added in here is that it adds to food security. If you've been to the grocery stores lately, you'll notice food is being hoarded up. Seeds are being hoarded up. Johnny's Seed Company is actually not taking orders until April. But the other thing is it saves money. And one of the things that research has shown is that a typical 20 by 50 garden plot will save a family about $500 in veggies a year. Now, you might not think 500 bucks is that much money, but it's a pretty significant way to a new gun, okay? So save money anywhere you can. Growing your own garden makes people eat more healthily. I am a sworn carnivore, okay? I would not eat veggies if my wife didn't make me. But a funny thing happens when I put the work into growing them in the garden. Yeah, now I want to eat them. I'll eat that carrot where otherwise I normally wouldn't. The other thing about gardening is it's a pleasant hobby. When I was 16 years old, I didn't think I'd say that, but I do now. And also, it's something the whole family can do together, whether you're 3 years old or 90 years old. It's a great way to bring the family together. So to begin with, what's the first step in gardening in Alaska? Well, the first step in gardening anywhere is to plan your garden. Okay, you wouldn't build a house without a plan, and you don't want to garden without it either. because if you look at the picture of this limo here, okay, this is obviously a well-planned limo. That's what you want instead of a limo without a plan. Now, when I look at that picture, though, from the Alaskan in me goes, you know, I'd rather have that limo than the planned out one. Anyway, the bottom line is planning your garden beforehand saves time and it saves money. One of the things I always get in trouble with my wife is I go to the grocery store hungry and without a plan. And I buy all this stuff that when I get home, I'm like, what was I thinking? Well, that's the same thing with gardening, especially when the garden magazines begin to arrive in January and you just buy. Or you're in the seed store and you just randomly start pulling pouches out of the shelves. So planning your garden, what we encourage here at the university, what we encourage you to do is to consider growing a 20 by 50 garden. That will supply a family of 4. Grow the veggies you like, okay? If you don't like zucchini, don't grow zucchini. Plan on planting enough to supply you through the year. If you're new to cooperative extension, we offer many courses on food preservation and canning so that you can take what you've grown this year and have it last through the entire year. I know right now out in my garage, I've still got enough potatoes to feed an army from last year. One of the things we encourage people to do too is to grow something in your garden for other people. A lot of folks grow veggies and then donate some of them to the food banks, but it's also a great way to meet your neighbor. Okay, maybe you've lived in your neighborhood 5 years and you still haven't met your next door neighbor. Well, bringing them, you know, some carrots or some tomatoes or something like that is a great way to open the door and meet your neighbor. And then finally, we encourage you to keep a gardening diary so that you know what works and what didn't work. I absolutely love the gardeners that keep diaries. And then when they have a problem, they come to me to help figure out what was going on. When they show me their diary, oh, that's like a doctor being able to look through medical records. So more on planning your garden. I recommend that you make a scale drawing of your garden and decide where you're going to put things. Your rows, ideally, if you can do it, should run north to south to take full advantage of maximum sunlight. Tall plants should be grown in the north part of those rows. That way, if they were grown in the south part, the tall plants would shadow out the shorter plants. And I'll give you an example of how effective that can be. Well, just a minute. Certainly, if you can, you want a southern exposure so that you can get full sun. And I was telling you about the north-south row orientation. Let me illustrate what that can do. I took this picture this afternoon. These are the raised beds in my backyard. And if you look at the raised bed on the right, you'll notice all the snow has melted off of it. Whereas the raised beds on the left, there's still lots of snow there. Well, the raised bed without the snow is oriented north to south. That snow has been melted off there for about a day. Whereas those to the left are oriented east to west. So you can see how much more sunshine that north to south orientation gets. Now, people always ask me, well, why do you have those 3 raised beds oriented east to west? Sun. Again, it's my wife. She didn't like the way they looked when they were oriented north to south. So that's how they got oriented. So the other thing, for the most part, you want to maximize light. So try to avoid tree shadows, shadows from buildings, because if you have extended morning or afternoon shadows, that can greatly reduce yields. A little bit later, we'll discuss why a little bit of shadowing might be good, but generally speaking, you want as much sun as you can. And also try to get as far away from the birch trees as you can. The birch tree roots will steal all your nutrients and all of your water. So try not to be close to them. And we'll talk more about these raised beds a little bit later on. Now, if you live in Palmer, one of the big things you got to be concerned with is the wind. Wind can damage the plants just from flopping them all around. They can also sandblast the plants. In the middle of the summer, you know, when we have one of these days where it gets to 80 degrees and then a windstorm kicks up, it can really suck the water out of the plants. And that's called desiccation. and it's a leading cause of death of garden plants. So plan on protecting your plants from wind. These can be things like shelter belts, hills, buildings, or you can build windbreaks. Windbreaks are critical in most of Alaska. This little one that you see here in the picture, these are just a couple of posts with plastic run in between. These can also help the plants stay warmer. You can use these windbreaks if you've got a garden on a hill. You can put one of these windbreaks uphill of the garden, and that will deflect cold water draining down, or cold air draining down at night. And there's something called the law of tens. For every foot of vertical windbreak you have, you get 10 foot of ground protection. So I'm going to go back to that picture of my raised beds, and if you look off there to the left, I have a 6 foot tall fence in my backyard. That means I've got 60 feet of wind protection, and that's the reason those raised beds are where they're at. Selecting vegetable varieties. It's very important that you choose wisely. Not all veggies do well here in Alaska. Not all Alaskan veggies do well across the state. You know, corn does great in Fairbanks, but not so much in Juneau. Well, lucky for you, we have a publication called Recommended Variety List for South Central Alaska. Its publication number is HGA 0031. Again, if you put that in a Google search, that publication will come right up, and you can download it for free. We have publications for interior Alaska, and we have a publication on recommended varieties for Southeast Alaska. The varieties for South Central Alaska were all tested right here at the Matanuska Experiment Farm. That's one of the important roles that the experiment farm continues to do, is test new varieties for hardiness in Alaska. Okay, there's two types of garden plants. There's cool season plants and there's warm season plants. Obviously, a cool season plant like broccoli or any of the leafy lettuces love Alaska and do well here in South Central. The problem with the leafy crops, though, is if you get too much light, they'll bolt. That means they've gone to seed, and once they do that, they lose all their flavor. We can give you more information on how to prevent bolting, but the secret to preventing bolting is give those leafy crops a little bit of shade, okay? And that will cool them off, because if you reduce the sunlight and reduce the temperature, that decreases the likelihood that they'll bolt. Okay, some like it hot, and those would be tomatoes, jalapenos, corn, okay? The warm season veggies, I don't recommend you try those if this is your first time gardening in Alaska. What I like to say is the PhD of gardening in Alaska is growing tomatoes. Here about, 12 years ago, I had a lady from Anchorage call me up and she goes, I want to know how to preserve a tomato. And I said, well, I'll put you in contact with our home economist. She'll teach you how to can it. And she said, no, I don't want to can it. I want to embalm it, because I've been trying to grow tomatoes for 20 years. And this is the first time I ever got one to go. So warm season veggies have to go in hoop houses or greenhouses. We'll discuss some alternatives to that here in a minute, but we have publications on that as well. And we also will be offering later on a class on greenhouse design and management. Okay, in Alaska, the secret to successful gardening is how can you tweak out an extra 2 or 3 degrees of soil temperature by a variety of different methods. The number one method for doing that is with raised bed gardens. Okay, you can see the picture there on the left, a typical raised bed. We recommend that they not be more than 36 inches across. The reason for that number is 36 inches means you can reach, most people can reach to the middle of the raised bed from either side of the raised bed. A lot of people use old tires. we cannot officially recommend the use of old tires, even though it's been done as long as there's been tires in Alaska. The problem with growing in tires is we don't know what toxins potentially could leach out of the tires and affect your veggies. An alternative to growing in a tire is to grow through a tire. If you see the picture there on the right, okay, I grow tomatoes most years outside by stacking tires around the pot with the tomato in it and put it out on our black asphalt driveway, and that soaks up enough heat for the tomatoes and peppers to do well. Something I neglected to mention, that picture in the middle, those stacked tires, that individual is growing potatoes in those stacked tires. What they did is they planted tomatoes in a single tire there on the bottom, and as the potato plants grew up, they would add another tire and more soil. And by the end of the growing season, they've got a column of potatoes. That's a great little trick to use if you have limited space to grow your spuds. Okay, I want to spend some time on these raised beds here. Again, these are the raised beds in my backyard. If you look at the raised bed on the right, it is 2 feet wide by 8 feet long. The reason for that is that's approximately 1/2 sheet of 1-inch plywood, which covers the bottom of that. The boards on the sides are 2x12s. And the reason I do 2x12s is that allows me to grow carrot, the shorter variety carrots in there if I want to. And the 12-inch depth means you can grow just about any garden plant that you'd like to. If you look really closely here, and I'll try to I'm putting the cursor here at the base of this leg, you can see, well, what you see there is a strip of copper. I place copper on each leg of the raised bed because we have got a real problem with slugs now. Slugs will crawl up from the ground, up the legs and into the raised bed, but they will not crawl over a strip of copper. So that's how I control slugs. You can get copper stripping at Lowe's or Home Depot. It's pretty inexpensive, and it comes as a tape that you can place on the legs. I have little outriggers here on the bottom of that raised bed. You may wonder why, well, the 3 raised beds to the left are 3 feet high. And there's 2 reasons for these elevated raised beds. One, I'm not a spring chicken anymore, and bending over on my knees is gotten to be really problematic. So this allows you to stand while you garden. The other advantage of an elevated raised bed is they warm up much, much quicker than a raised bed on the ground because the air can circulate underneath there. You can also enclose those areas underneath the raised beds, and it makes great storage space. The plywood bottom of the raised beds is treated plywood, which we don't recommend that you use any kind of treated wood in a raised bed. To overcome that, I line these with 2 sections of 4 mil plastic, and you can see the plastic sticking up along the edges right. Plastic, before you put the potting mixture in the raised bed, I drill 3 1/2-inch holes in the bottom of the bed, and I drill through the plastic. That gives the raised bed the ability to drain. And then I bolt the whole thing together with 4 lag bolts on each corner, and then I follow up with outside wood screws in there. These raised beds over here, they're about 6 years old, and I haven't noticed really any wear on them. The previous raised beds I had on the ground were about 10 years. So anyway, if you wanted to get more heat out of them, you could paint them a dark color as well. Okay, we're going to change gears here and talk about soil. Okay, only 5% of gardeners across the country ever have their soil tested to see what's in it. Okay, they just take a wild guess and apply what they think is the appropriate amount of fertilizer. Well, the thing is, you need to test your soil to know how much fuel is in your tank, because, you know, look at that little head of lettuce on the left compared to, you know, this giant cabbage at the state fair. Okay, I guarantee you they're testing their soil to see what's in it. Not testing your soil is kind of like going to the dentist and not asking for an x-ray, but just telling the dentist to drill until they find something. A soil test is an x-ray, and with a soil test, I can help you know exactly what's going on with your soil. So before you can have a soil sent to the lab, you gotta take a sample. We have publications on this as well, but I don't think you really need to download it because this slide explains it. To take a soil sample, it's best done in the fall before the soil freezes up. You can do it now when the soil thaws, but I will probably not get back to you with the recommendation because in the spring, I'm entirely, all my time's taken up working with the farmers and getting their recommendations done. So anyway, do it in the fall after you've harvested your garden. What you want to do is you want to collect multiple samples 6-inch deep from throughout your garden, and then take all of those samples and put it in a bucket, mix them together, and then pull 1 cup of soil out of that. And what you want to do is say place it on your garage floor overnight to let it dry out. The people that run the soil labs really appreciate it when they get dry soil. Okay, where do you send the soil? Well, unfortunately, the budget situation about 5 years ago forced the closing of the only public soil lab, and that was here at the Matanuska Experiment Farm. We had hoped that when budgets recovered and things like that, we could reopen that lab. But what the budget situation didn't do to the lab, the earthquake finished off. You have never seen so much broken glass in your life, and it would cost many millions of dollars, probably about $20 million to rebuild that lab. Fortunately, there's really good alternatives. We have a publication, and this is a screenshot of it. It's called Factors to Consider in Selecting a Soil Testing Laboratory. Again, if you Google the publication number FGV 00045, you can download this. It lists it recommends 3 different labs that you can send your soil test to. It's very, very important that you send your sample to one of those 3 labs. There's lots of soil labs out there, say in Washington and Oregon and in places like that, but they're not set up to handle the types of soil that we have here in Alaska. Okay, in the West, the soils typically tend to be alkaline. Well, in Alaska, most of our soils tend to be acidic. So it's got to go to a lab that can handle acidic soil conditions. Now, of those 3 labs that are in that publication, I can't recommend one over the other, but if I were you, I would select the lab that was cheapest, okay, provided the most information, and got the sample turned around in 24 hours. And that would be Brookside Laboratories. And there on the screen, its website is www.blink.com. There's their phone number. I would write that down because the information, soil sample order with, they email you the form, and why they don't put it on their website is beyond me, but they don't. Their website is a wealth of information. The link is there. It's that's their email. If you email them at info@blink.com, they'll mail you back the request forms. Very, very important. If you use Brookside Laboratories, you need to request soil test package S001AN. Okay. The reason that test gives you the most information without you paying for anything you don't need. I won't bore you with the details on this, but that particular test is designed specifically for gardeners because it has a special parameter in it called buffer pH, which is probably the most important test parameter in a test. Oh, for the people that joined us a little bit late, the entire presentation is being recorded, and once it's packaged up, we'll post it on our Facebook page. So if you missed some of these slides or things like that, you can look at them again. Okay, what does a soil test indicate? The most important thing that a soil test tells you is the pH, okay? People tend to think that nutrient levels in the garden is the most important thing to know, and it's not. It's getting the pH right. Fix the pH before you fix anything else, okay? What the soil test, if you order that soil test package I told you, it'll have a line on there called buffer pH, and that allows me to calculate how much lime you need to get your soil pH. Do you want to get it to a 5.0, or excuse me, do you want to get it to a 6.0, a 7.0, or whatever? But again, if you learn nothing else in this presentation this evening, fix the pH first. Okay, the big things that a soil test tells you, the three primary things are nitrogen, and nitrogen is represented as an N, phosphorus, and it's represented as a P, and potassium, which is represented as a K. That's the old NPK that you hear all the old-time farmers and gardeners talk about. So since I just said that pH, the potential of hydrogen, is the most important things, okay, most plants, but not all, most plants prefer a range of 6.5 to 7.0, okay? We recommend that you grow potatoes in pHs of 5 to 5.5, okay? The reason for that, if you look at the little illustration there at the bottom of the page, a pH of 7 is perfectly neutral, which means it's neither alkaline nor acidic, okay? Basically, the pH of 6 is 10 times more acidic than a pH of 7. A pH of 5 is 100 more times acidic than a pH of 7. A pH of 4 is 1,000 times more acidic. And by the time you get down to 1, you get to basically the equivalent of battery acid. Very few things in Alaska will grow in pHs below about a 4.5. Some of the folks out towards Talkeetna and Willow and those get into some of the 4 pHs. Those are really important to fix. We actually have very little alkaline soil in Alaska, but just so you know, a pH of 14 would be like laundry bleach. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but it takes time to alter pH. Let's say you live out on Point McKenzie and you discover your soil is a 4.5, okay? At a minimum, it's going to take 6 months to a year for you to fix that pH. The way you fix pH is by applying lime, and lime takes about 6 months to reach its full effect. When you add lime to soil, this is often referred to as sweetening soil. So if you go to the garden store and you see something that says soil sweetener, what it is garden lime. And when you buy garden lime, you can buy it as agricultural lime, which is basically, it has a consistency of talcum powder. You can get it in a form called prilled lime. That means it comes in little pellets. Prilled lime is so much easier to apply because you can do it with a rotary spreader and you don't get as much of it on your pants and shoes. Whereas the agricultural lime, it gets all over the place. It's a real mess. Now, one of the things when you go to like Lowe's or Home Depot and you ask for advice, they'll tell you, no, don't use prilled lime. It doesn't act as fast as agricultural powdered lime. They are true, but it's only about 1 day slower, okay? As soon as those pellets get wet, they break up immediately. An alternative to lime is wood ash. Wood ash will increase the pH of soil. It's also a good source of potassium. I'll talk about wood ash more in a little bit. The thing about wood ash is you don't want to get carried away with it because some people have put so much wood ash on their gardens over the years that they've now got an alkalinity problem. And it's much easier to fix an acidic problem than it is to fix an alkaline problem. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the N, P, and K, the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Nitrogen, of course, creates lush leaves. Most people know that too little nitrogen is a real problem for a garden. The leaves begin to yellow and they don't produce as well. But a lot of people don't realize that too much nitrogen is just as bad as too little. When you put too much nitrogen down, the plants become very lush, and there's really no reason for the plant to reproduce. Those veggies are how the plant reproduces. So one of the symptoms of too much nitrogen is lots of leaves and not very many veggies. It's better to have your plants slightly starved for nitrogen than too much. Really important in Alaska, well, and everywhere, is phosphorus. Part of the problem with phosphorus in Alaska is the cold soils we have bind up phosphorus. So in Alaska, we use more phosphorus. Gardeners here use more phosphorus than any other state in the country. When I first got up here and saw the university recommendations for phosphorus, I thought it was a typo. We use a lot of it. The important thing about phosphorus is it encourages good root growth, okay? Potassium, a lot of people don't know this, but potassium is the most important nutrient for plants. A plant will use 1.5 times more potassium than nitrogen. And potassium is important because it allows plants to utilize nitrogen. Photosynthesis would not be possible without potassium. So after you get your soil test back, what often happens is you're all excited, you open up the email, you open up the attachment, and then you get mad because you look at it and it's nothing but a sheet full of numbers that mean absolutely nothing to you, okay? Well, that's where the Cooperative Extension Service comes in, and where I spend a very great deal of my time this part of the year. People send me the results of their soil tests, and I tell them what it means and make a fertilizer recommendation for them. It's completely free, and it's, well, it's a big part of what I do. There's my phone number, 745-3639. I'll give you my email at the very end. Don't hesitate to call me. I will say, while we're in this coronavirus pandemic, I'm not in the office, so you can call my office phone, but it's being forwarded to my cell phone. The problem is, if I'm on another line when you call, it goes to voicemail in my office, and it's very difficult for me to retrieve my voicemails at home. So if you don't get me when you call that number, call back and be a pest, okay? Right now, being stuck at home, not being able to go out with friends and things like that, the next best thing is answering garden questions. And let me tell you, a guy called today, and it would have taken 5 minutes to answer his question. We talked for 30 minutes. So don't hesitate to call me. Okay, let's say for whatever reason, you're not, and a soil test, if you do it at Brookside, is 19 bucks. Let's say you're not going to do the soil test. Okay, that's fine. Here's a generic fertilizer recommendation for most flower gardens and vegetable gardens. As soon as the ground thaws up and you can work it, apply 4 pounds of 832-16 fertilizer per 100 square feet. 832-16 is the ultimate garden fertilizer. If you sign up for our Master Gardener course in the fall, we'll explain why that is, but just know for now, that's the magic fertilizer that you want to use until it into the top 2 inches of the soil. If you're growing things that are really heavy feeders like potatoes, you might want to apply another 1.5 pounds per 100 square feet about mid-season. Okay, that's a conventional fertilizer recommendation. When I say conventional, that's chemical fertilizer. A lot of people don't want to use chemical fertilizer. They want to be organic. And here at the university, we recommend that you go organic. The problem with organic is it's considerably more complicated. I call using chemical fertilizer a science. For me, doing organic fertilizer recommendations is more like voodoo. Okay, there's so many variables, but here's a generic organic fertilizer recommendation for a typical Alaska flower or vegetable garden. And that would be 4 pounds of blood or fish meal per 100 square feet, 5 pounds of bone meal, okay, 5 pounds of langbeinite. And so the fish meal or blood meal, that's for the nitrogen. The bone meal is for the phosphorus. The langbeinite is for the potassium. Langbeinite can be a bit pricey. So an alternative to langbeinite is 1 gallon of clean wood ashes per 100 square feet. Normally, I would say just use wood ash every year in your garden. But again, if you get carried away with the wood ash, you'll drive the pH up and eventually you'll get into an alkaline situation. Okay, we're getting down towards the end here where we'll answer more questions, but this time of year, many people have started things in their greenhouse or, the garden sales are coming up, things like that, and people will go buy their starts. I know several of the greenhouses open for the first time this week and the starts are flying off the shelf. Those starts are very tender, okay? They've been in a very protected situation. They've got lots of light and it's warm and, all the water they want. And now you're going to stick them outside in the wild wilderness of Alaska. Well, what needs to happen is those tender plants need to be hardened off so that they can take those new conditions. Imagine if it's February, or better yet, March, okay, and you've been cooped up all winter long, and you take a vacation to Hawaii, and you go lay out on the beach for 5 hours. What's going to happen? You are going to be terribly burned and miserable and things like that. So what you got to do is you've got to prepare these plants. Hardening off is kind of like going to the tanning salon a few times before you go to Hawaii. So what you want to do is with your starts, when it gets warm enough, say beginning to middle of May, take them outside for 2 or 3 hours when you get home from work and then bring them in. A great way to do this is just put them on a garden wagon, pull them out, bring them in. And then each day, just extend that. And after you do that for about a week, okay, they're ready to go in the ground. Now, Deb Blaylock is on here, and I'm going to give her the opportunity to speak if she'd like to make any comments. But I do want to tell you about the Matsu Master Gardeners and the Master Gardener program. We teach the Master Gardener program every fall, okay? It's a 40-hour class. Generally, we meet 3 hours a night, once a week, and we'll run up till just about Christmas time. And basically, it's a undergraduate horticulture class. About half the classes are taught by guest speakers who are experts in their field from around Alaska, and occasionally we'll fly in an expert from the outside, okay? A lot of people take the class just because they want the information. To get the title Alaska Master Gardener, okay, you also have to contribute 40 hours of community service with something to do with gardening. I would say the majority of our Master Gardener candidates get a lot of their time in volunteering for the fair, but there's a lot of other different opportunities. There's some Master Gardeners who started a Junior Master Gardener Club. There's others who volunteer to maintain gardens at senior centers. Other people maintain gardens at libraries. So there's a lot of different things, but I can tell you more about that. Deb, did you want to say anything on that? Well, not hearing her, I'll just tell you that meetings are the first Mondays of each month at 7 p.m. The meetings are suspended right now because of, oh, are you there, Deb? Nope, that's not Deb. So anyway, during the cold months, oh, y'all, if you could mute your microphone, thanks. So they meet at the Matanuska Experiment Farm and Extension Center there behind the hospital off the Old Trunk Road. You do not have to be a master gardener or a member to attend, okay? A lot of people will attend a single meeting just because there's going to be an interesting speaker. In the summertime, they often have field trips to go visit different things, so it's a lot of fun. I would encourage you to become a member. Again, you don't have to be a master gardener. It's really cheap. I think a single membership's like 10 or 15 bucks for the year, and you get the Matsu Master Gardener newsletter. You can check out their website. The address is there, matsumastergardeners.com. So there's my email address. And again, there's my direct line. I would prefer, if you can, that you email me. The reason for that is if I wake up at 3 in the morning and need to get a snack, I can check my email. And if you have an interesting question, I can answer it at 3:15 in the morning. The thing about the email is I check it frequently. And a lot of times when you call me on the phone and you have a question, I don't have the answer. I have to go research it. Whereas if you email it to me, I can research it and then send you the answer. So at this point, I'm going to unshare my screen here, and we'll take any questions that you might have. Deb's been answering them. I see over there in the chat box. And I'll put in a plug, some upcoming classes to look forward to. On April 30th, we're going to have a really, really fun program that we call Chicken University. It's everything you need to know to raise chickens in Alaska. I'm the state poultry specialist, which only in Alaska can your single qualification to be the state poultry specialist is that when I was 8 years old, that was my first 4-H project. But I've raised chickens ever since, and we've got a lot of tips and secrets on how to do it in cold weather, and especially if you're off the grid. Other things to look forward to, we'll be having classes on composting, what we call fast composting, how to go from raw material in a compost pile to finished product in 3 months. It's really easy, but there's some secrets that not many people know. Other things to look forward to, we'll be having some classes on how to read and interpret your own soil sample reports. Just about anything you could think of. And probably a favorite is how to create a killer lawn. So if, you know, some people, the last thing they want is a nice lawn. Other people spend thousands of dollars to get that nice lawn. And we know the secrets how to do it. And believe it or not, the easiest place to have a great lawn is Alaska. So if you have more questions, you can write them in the chat box there. Normally we would open it up, but let's see, we have 78 people on here, and I'm afraid it would just be pandemonium with that many people asking questions with their mics off. So we'll leave the Zoom screen up here. Again, we're recording this. And it takes an hour to program this long to compile on Zoom, but we'll post it to our Facebook page. Feel free to share it with anyone, especially kids or family members. That link to that video will stay up for a year, so use it anytime you want, and we will be recording all of our future presentations like this as well. So I'd say watch our Facebook page. There's lots of good information on there. Melissa Clampett does a really good job of keeping it up to date with really interesting programs. If you have an idea for a program, don't hesitate to float that forward, because that's what we're here for. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for joining us. If there's a silver lining to this pandemic, it's that we're all at home and we're all meeting by Zoom now. Normally this class, on a cloudy spring day like today, we would expect to have about 20 to 25 people in it. If it was a sunny day, there would probably be no one that would show up. But I saw as high as 85 people in the program today, which we're so happy about because we want to get this information out because we want to make you as successful a gardener as possible. So thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to leave the website up until the questions stop coming in. But have a great gardening season.
Thank you, Steve.
Hey, Kathy. Kathy, the person I just said hi to is Kathy Tweet. She's the master gardener out in Nome. How would you like to have the title of Nome Master Gardener?
Actually, we have a few people who have that title also.
Well, you're the one I know.
Well, thank you.
Kathy runs the Nome office for the Cooperative Extension Service out there. So if you're ever in Nome, stop by the campus and say hi to Kathy.
Well, actually, with the current social distancing thing, I'm working from home also.
Well, perhaps next year at the Iditarod.
Or before, sometime in the fall, maybe. Thank you.
And for the folks that are still on here, I just want to say a big thank you to Melissa Clampett and Deb Blaylock. When I'm presenting, I can't see chat box. They must, I hope they still have fingers left when this is all over. So thank you all for moderating those questions. All right, y'all. Well, it looks like most of the questions have slowed down now. So I'll say thank you for coming out tonight. You have my email. If you think of a question, be sure to send it to me, and I'll be sure to answer it quickly. Just so you know, if you send me an email and you don't get an answer back within a day or at most two, something happened. Okay. There have been times when I've been deleting emails and I accidentally deleted one I didn't answer. So I try to be extremely punctual on returning email. Usually you should get an email back the same day you send it, unless you send it in the evening. And when we get back to whatever normal is, and I'm back in the office, if you leave a voicemail message for me and you don't hear back and you don't get a message on my voicemail, then I'm like on vacation or out of town or something. If you don't get a return call, even to just say, I don't have the answer yet, I'm working on it, something happened. Oftentimes people will leave me very, very long, detailed emails and then blurt out their phone number at the very end, which means I have to hit the rewind button multiple times to get the message. And on my phone, the rewind button is right next to the delete button. So there have been times when I wasn't looking and I hit delete and I didn't have the number down. So just remember that if you don't hear from me, something happened. And don't be afraid to be a pest. Okay. Right now, when we're in this pandemic, if you're trying to call my cell, just keep calling. All right. Well, you all have a good evening. Again, thanks to Deb and Melissa, and we'll see you at the next program.